Tashdilek, today the world is tackling with climate change crisis and its impact upon humanity is beyond anyone's imagination. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has unequivocally been advocating for the protection of environment in order to have a better world for future generations. As His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama turns 86 today, let us try to understand his thoughts on environment. To discuss on this issue, I have no other person better than Shri Sonam Wangchuk ji from Ladakh, whose voice on environment has reached millions of people across the world. Welcome to Tibettv, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tashidale.
Sir, I have to begin by asking you about His Holiness's views on environment. So 5 years ago, His Holiness on climate change said, I quote, "This is not a question of one nation or two nations. This is a question of humanity. Our world is our home." So, sir, how do you see the significance and relevance of this message?
Thank you. First of all, I wish His Holiness the Dalai Lama the warmest wishes on his 86th birthday. More than His Holiness, I think may all of us in Ladakh, the Tibetans, the people in India and the world gain from His Holiness's wisdom. I think His Holiness is one of the wisest and eldest persons alive today who has been a voice of conscience for the planet Earth and has always appealed for our actions to be in sync with the environment and the health of the planet. So couldn't be better put than how His Holiness has put that it is not an issue of a nation here or there. It is actually humanity's issue because we'll all equally suffer an environmental catastrophe. And we have already been seeing that it is beyond borders, beyond nationalities. It is global and it is for the entire planet. I very much echo what His Holiness has been saying, and I think the struggle of the future, the wars of the future should not and need not be between nations and peoples. It should be a combined challenge that we all have to face, and that challenge is nothing else than climate change. So this should be a uniting factor now that it is such a huge challenge where countries like India and China squabbling over border lines seems like two neighbors by the ocean arguing about their fence when a tsunami is coming which will wash them away both. So it is senseless to be squabbling about border lines and national narrow interests when there is a huge threat that is coming very fast towards the entire humanity. So we really have to unite and take on this challenge. And I have great hopes that what His Holiness appealed to the world will have an effect if the world is to live happily.
Sir, His Holiness also called climate change a problem which human beings created, and now it is responsibility of all humanity to take actions. And he further said, we are relying on praying to God or to Buddha. Sometimes I feel this is very illogical. So, sir, how should the world leaders in particular and individuals in general to come forward and take concrete actions to mitigate climate change?
Very, very true that climate change, this you could call it the biggest challenge of our times or the biggest monster, biggest enemy we have to overcome, is totally a creation of human beings, not only by how we act and behave today, for example, extravagant lives with 3 or 4 cars and 5 or 6 houses and 50 pairs of shirts and shoes. Definitely that lifestyle is a major cause if you look at it immediately. But I think more than that, the approach towards modernization, progress in life that we took which was perhaps an outcome of the Industrial Revolution and the modern Western economics, where we thought that success was to have more and more, and for that exploit the planet more and more, and live like 50 people live. So this approach has gone wrong, and I think we have to come back to something like the Buddha said 2500 years ago, that for a human being, a bigger success is to conquer a single desire than to fulfill 1000 desires. Unfortunately, we are today walking on the path of seeing fulfilling 1000 desires as success, rather than conquering even a single desire as a bigger success. So we have to bring back the world to that kind of approach to life, that kind of economics, a long-term economics of wisdom. As far as, hoping that some Buddha, some God will save us, some Allah will save us, I think the various philosophers and spiritual lights like Muhammad Sahab, peace be upon him, had himself in Islamic thoughts said that you must trust in God, but do not forget to tether your camel. So don't trust in God so much that you leave the camel untied and then blame the gods for making them run away or go into your farms. So we must, if you want to, have faith in whoever you have, but do your own actions also. So we must not forget to tie our camels while we have faith in Buddha and Muhammad Sahib, or various, Jesus Christ and the Brahma, Shiva. But we must act also. In fact, I think there needs to be an updated version of religion and spirituality, where we see how we live also as an index of violence and non-violence. Every religion, since you took up the issue, speaks against violence and preaches peace and non-violence. Now, in today's 21st century, violence is not committed with guns and daggers as much as it is committed by our lifestyle. So you could be looking like living harmlessly without any violence, but your car that looks so sleek and beautiful becomes like a weapon of mass destruction when it drops a kilogram of carbon dioxide every 4 or 5 kilometers. Then your weapon is not a gun or dagger, but your car, your big house with all kinds of fuel guzzling gadgets. This is where we have to think for ourselves for today's world, rather than rely on the messages that our spiritual leaders gave thousands of years ago for the challenges of those times. We need to update and upgrade our religious principles also to the modern times. So we need a Buddhism version 2.0, Islam version 2.0, Hinduism version 2.0, just like we have all these systems and software that are version 2 and 3 and 4. It's time that we upgrade our faiths and include this violence of lifestyle in how we see violence or non-violence in today's context.
Sir, when we talk about climate change crisis these days, Tibet's plateau comes to our mind immediately. So, sir, as an environmentalist, how important do you think is Tibetan plateau and its environment to its neighboring countries in general? And sir, you live in Ladakh, a region that is immediate neighbor to Tibet. So tell us about your experience with the consequences of extreme environmental degradation in Tibet on climate of Ladakh.
Well, the Tibetan Plateau and the Hindu Kush Himalayas are like the water tank for on the roof of the world, for the whole world. You know, directly or indirectly, roughly 1.3 billion people in India and China and several other countries in the region depend for their water needs on the Tibetan plateau and this whole region that is often called the third pole of the planet, which holds most of the fresh water in this area. So we have to give the due importance to this region and treat it likewise. As I said, it is like the water tank. So imagine a house where the water tank has a leakage and it's depleting every day. Very soon there'll be no water left. You can imagine how life will be for those houses. So similarly, for this home called planet Earth, like His Holiness said, this region is like the water tank for so many people. So we must respect it as such and keep it safe for posterity, not just for how we need today and not play around as if there is no tomorrow. So I do totally agree that this region is one of the most important assets of the planet for one of the most populated regions of the world.
Sir, in recent years, the Chinese government's dam projects posed a huge threat to downstream countries depending on Tibet's rivers. And how do you foresee this situation if China succeeds in these projects? And what are the consequences for India?
Well, I think every country, particularly every country that wants to have a respect in the world, have to behave in such ways that their actions do not harm the peace and harmony of the region and of the people around. So, water being such a sensitive, critical issue, countries like China, if they want to have a leading role globally, have to behave. You know, even in villages of Ladakh, we see a beautiful system, village wisdom. You know, we have very little water in Ladakh, like Tibet. It's a high altitude desert. So there are localities and families who live upstream. There are those downstream. Left to itself, the ones upstream will take everything and leave nothing for those downstream. But even at village level, there is so much wisdom. There has been that we have systems called chures. I'm sure in Tibet also you might have chures, the system of water distribution coming from the generation to generation, which makes sure that the ones upstream have enough regard and concern for those downstream so that everybody enjoys enough water, even down to the last house in the village, who would otherwise get none of it if it was a jungle Raj. You know, might is right. So if village wisdom could guide in this way, then definitely countries like China on the global scene have to behave. In fact, I think the respect and maturity that people of the world will associate with countries like China will be directly dependent on how it treats Tibet, the region of Tibet, environmentally and politically. How it treats will be seen as an index of how respectable it behaves. If it wants to attain a leading position, then it will have to be very fair, very just to the whole region and treat the environment of Tibet and people of Tibet in a fair and just way. If it does not, and if it doesn't care about people and environment of Tibet and the regions downstream, then it will be seen as a rogue state. It will be seen as a out of control rogue state, not as a respectable leading country, nation of the world. So it's for us to see in the coming years how it deals with these issues, for us to see whether we can look at a country like China as a wise member of the global village. So just like in villages you have a system of village council, you have United Nations. So forums like United Nations take a very important role in such situations to make sure that countries like China handle such things that the effects of which go beyond boundaries and beyond centuries. I think there needs to be that kind of mediation also, but I very much hope that there is wisdom in this great nation, and it behaves in ways that will earn it respect in the world.
So now coming back to His Holiness's views on environment, in one of His Holiness's addresses on environment in 1992, His Holiness said, I quote, "If in our generation we exploit every available things, trees, water, mineral resources or anything without bothering about the next generation, about the future, that is our guilt, isn't it?" So the question is, how strong do you think is this message, and how the leaders should think about the next generation?
Well, I think leadership is all about thinking beyond yourself and thinking beyond your time. So being human, we have to use our faculty of empathy for others and not just oneself, and for future and not just today. So I very much agree with this, that we human beings will have to think for generations to come. As wise people have said, this planet is not something we have inherited from our ancestors, but it's something we have to safekeep for our posterity. So the kind of planet we hand over to our children will very much depend on us, and I'm afraid the generations in the recent generations and present have not been very good at keeping this planet safe for future. I have a lot of faith and hope in the coming generations, coming youngsters who show quite a lot of enthusiasm about environmental concerns, apart from just pure commercial economic concerns, which were the hallmark of the recent past generations. So I think and I hope that wisdom like that of His Holiness will touch tomorrow's generation, who are now little youngsters, and they, I hope, will keep this planet for posterity and not just exploit it for their joy and consumption of today. So I very much hope that in His Holiness we all find a wise elderly person of the global village, the global wise man in the global village, a spiritual leader for many, who guide the future generations towards behavior and a lifestyle that is in harmony with sustainability, long-term sustainability of all living beings, not just human beings, not just my country, not just my region, my family, and me. That's my sincere hope on this very important day.
With this, we are going to end our discussion here. I would like to thank you for highlighting the importance of His Holiness's views on environment, and you have also talked about the importance of protecting environment. Thank you so much for taking our time with Tibettv.
Thank you.